First of all, the first thing I want to do is to apologize profusely on behalf of the Secretary General and myself. A number of bilateral meetings with ministers were scheduled by my office. Unfortunately, some of those meetings we do not have simultaneous interpretation. So they speak English and then they speak another language, and the translation as interpretation has made it very difficult to cut short the discussion. On the other hand, it's also disrespectful to be holding, on account of one or three ministers, to be holding other ministers waiting. And I just want you to please forgive and to ask for your forgiveness in this regard. I hope we can count on your understanding, and but it was challenging. It was challenging. Perhaps at the end of the first Ministerial Roundtable, we should have made effort to schedule this meeting to start 30 minutes later, because we ended the other meeting 30 minutes later than was scheduled. But I hope you've enjoyed your lunch and you've had the opportunity for further consultation and coordination. And the second agenda of this month is what we're going to discuss now is the issue of regulatory adaptation. How do we, as member states and policy decision makers, adapt to new technologies in a way that we ourselves will innovate? That we innovate and create new systems of working in the way we handle things. This is not only at the national level, regional level, but also at the level of IQ itself. Because if we know what you have to do and the changes you have to make, then we also will have to adapt to those changes so that we can work closely with you and meet your needs as an international organization. Similarly to this morning, this agenda will revolve around three main areas to define innovations play in the landscape of aviation regulation and governance. Firstly, we'll discuss the current state of regulatory processes and the possibilities of reforms to adapt to the environment they evolve in through sharing among concerned stakeholders. The second area, we will approach innovation and new technology from a different, more positive angle, which will help us identify the opportunities, how innovation can serve governments to become relevant partners for the aviation and technological industry. And in the third area, we'll be discussing a possible shift in work culture and structure to promote the comprehension and adoption of innovation and technology within governments themselves. So let's build upon the success of this morning session and to continue leveraging this platform to share and exchange knowledge. I'll give the Secretary General now the floor to elaborate on the topics quickly, and then we can get started. Secretary General, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. As the President just mentioned, following this morning's discussion, I believe there is common overall view is the regulatory areas we need to adapt ourselves. So I would like to give some thoughts about this afternoon's meeting. And I would like to suggest we will dive into three areas that will help us navigate through the topics of innovation, in aviation, regulation, and governance. In the first area, we will focus on governmental policies and practices. We will assess if there is a need for regulatory reforms to ensure that the policies remain not only relevant, but are also flexible, adapt to new challenges. We will also share our experiences on the perception of government policies' ability to keep pace with the speed of change and challenges that governments face when moving their policies and decision-making process beyond catching-up mode. Furthermore, we will discuss options, how governments can learn from the private sector to improve their decision and policy-making processes, such as the possibility of holding regular consultations among governments, industry, and emerging private innovation sector. The second area inspects the benefits that innovation may bring to the regulatory processes themselves by integrating latest technology into the daily operations. We will share our experiences on the latest technologies, new methodologies, or tools that you have adopted and improvement they have brought. We will identify regulatory areas where innovation such as digitalization and automation may help governments to meet the challenging needs and expectations of stakeholders. As part of this discussion, we can also brainstorm on the possibility of building a digital government to create public value. The introduction of new technologies in existing governmental processes may trigger major pushbacks from various parts of the processes. It is important to identify these potential pushbacks in order to anticipate and mitigate them. So finally, we will look at the cost reduction that the introduction of the latest technologies can bring, taking into consideration the scale and cost of investment. Our third and last area focuses on the topic of culture and structural change in the work environment to facilitate the adoption of latest technologies and promote their benefit to the organization. We will look at the ways that the governments can position and structure themselves to bring forth and execute new ideas so as to deliver high-quality programs and services to aviation stakeholders. This will also be an opportunity to share your experience in making innovation an institutional routine and an integrated practice in the policy-making processes. We will also identify as well as your best practices and on when building a culture, environment, and capacity within the administration with the ability to execute an innovation agenda and regulatory reform. In this context, we would like to hear some examples of public service innovation or operational excellence. So I look very much forward to hearing from your thoughts and experience, best practices, and lessons learned on all these areas. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Okay. I want to give the floor now to Finland, please. Finland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon. I think we all agree that the regulation shouldn't restrict development. Instead, it should support innovation, and it's of the utmost importance that in discussions concerning these newcomers we take into consideration the perspectives of different airspace users while maintaining the highest levels of safety and security for all existing airspace users. So we should aim to promote the operation of the markets and regulate only what is necessary to meet safety, security, and environmental objectives. And this is what was in the morning called also smart regulation. So we need to be more proactive from regulators' side and engage in early phase in dialogue with all the stakeholders we need to also have community involvement, like we have heard today, and we need to be able to move best practices, and so I guess it's this better dialogue, and we need to be more agile, more in early phase, and be ready to share experiences between each other. And I think it's a good idea to use ICAO also as one forum for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Finland. And Kenya.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. President. Kenya's contribution is under regulatory reform, and indeed we agree that there's a concern that government policies and practices have often not kept pace with the speed of change. In governments, we have traditionally been slow in reacting, and we now know that with the new pace of development in technological growth and new entrants, etc., we have to move at the same pace or as nearly as close as possible to the change that is happening around us. So now, in order to ensure that this reform of regulation is relevant, it should also be responsive to the operational environment. It is important that these reforms are undertaken as often as possible to continuously meet the operating requirements that we have. So instances where rapid reforms have been undertaken also exist and are necessitated by developments in the industry as well as technological advancements, in particular when we're looking at new entrants that have come up, drones, high-altitude balloons, and many other innovations. So we therefore require smart regulations and to act quickly. So these regulatory reforms are an important element in the oversight of the aviation industry and for the enhancement of aviation safety and security. And therefore, these are a major challenge given that regulations review process in many countries takes a long time, and there's also a need to understand the impact of these reforms as well as extensive consultations among the affected players. So what we do in Kenya is that we develop regulations, then we invite stakeholders, all the relevant stakeholders, to come and look at the proposals that we have created. We take their responses, their reactions, and we try and incorporate them into these new reforms as we try and make our regulations smart. So our main impending or the thing that is slowing us down at the moment is adequate capacity. So we need to develop capacity to be able to enable the development and review of regulations as appropriate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Kenya. Canada, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to be here today to participate in the 5th Annual ICAO World Aviation Forum. And on behalf of the Government of Canada, I'd like to, it's my pleasure to welcome all delegates here to Montreal for 2 weeks of really interesting and critically important discussions around the ICAO Assembly. I commend the Secretariat on behalf of the Government of Canada for advancing this strategically important dialogue on regulatory reform. It is clearly a shared, I think the question, the answer to the first question is that it is a challenge to keep, to have our policies and regulatory practice keep pace with change and to ensure they do not impede innovation and progress. And it's one that is sort of shared by many countries, and we're searching for different solutions, so it is a great opportunity to be able to compare how we're doing it. A couple of elements that Canada has begun to focus on in this respect is, first and foremost, is given the complexity of ensuring safe, secure and environmentally responsible aviation, there is a large regulatory system, and it requires a sustained and focused effort for reform and modernization that needs to be continual and not episodic. A few priorities that we've begun to focus on in Canada with some initial success include the following. One is the sometimes in our experience we've probably missed opportunities, which we are now pursuing, to align our regulatory system to the international standard, particularly the ICAO standard. It simplifies and having a regulatory system that can incorporate by reference or have a faster regulatory process if you're aligning precisely to an international standard can make it easier to advance standards and it makes it easier for compliance by the industry. Another area where we've had some success is to focus not just on the policy and the regulation, but also how they're implemented, and moving wherever possible to a digital delivery and digital administration of the regulatory system, because often the process of complying with the regulation can be quite burdensome beyond the regulation itself. And where we need to put in new rules, to do so in a manner that supports innovation and creates freedom and flexibility to the industry to grow and develop as where the opportunity, the technology, and the innovation takes it. And one example, which I will close with, is for the remotely piloted aircraft systems. Canada, until the beginning of this year, did not have a regulatory system, but approved every proposal and every use of an RPAS sort of one at a time, which was very burdensome for the industry and very burdensome for the regulator. We have put in place a clear and consistent set of rules that to allow their use, so industry can plan and can understand the operating environment, which has enabled it to grow in a way it couldn't without the regulations. But most importantly, we put the entire system online. It's a 100% digital delivery. And within minutes of turning the new system on, we had hundreds, and then within days, thousands of registrations. And within the first, I think we turned the system on at midnight, and by 3 a.m. we had people who had registered their RPAS. By 6 a.m. we had regulatees who had passed the exams for the authorization, and it's a speed of implementation that would have been impossible had we continued our normal process. So I would encourage all of us to think. We have been very happy with this experience. I encourage all of us to see the opportunity of moving the administration of the regulations to digital as a way to facilitate and enable innovation and reform in civil aviation. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Canada. Now I turn to the international organizations. European Commission, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think this is a very important topic as such. It goes very much in the heart of the challenge as well. I mean, how to establish a regulation which is modern and at the same time which is also flexible and also holistic. And I think that it's always easier to say than to do it, especially when you look at it from the regulator's perspective. It's also the fact that how to avoid that each time the science or industry will come up with an innovation, we have to adopt our rules to it. And if we want to avoid this, I think, especially in the areas which are very dear to our heart, like safety, security, and ATM, it's important to move away from a purely compliance-based rules to rules which are based on proper risk analysis and in line, of course, with the safety management principles. And I think this is also something. I think there was also the question: what can can we learn from the private sector? I think this is also something where we actually have learned that from the private sector. I mean, it is clear that they always want to have the highest level of safety and the lowest level of risk, but you don't base yourself only on one sort of bit of old-fashioned model, but you also need to assess that and also the probability. And as we have seen, it has maintained the level of safety also very, very high. And of course, the shift towards more risk-based regulation will demand a lot from everybody in aviation. And we should not forget that until now, the compliance-based rules have been heavy, but they have been working, contributing also to the current levels of safety. So when we move forward with the risk-based regulation, it also requires a change of mindset of everybody involved and not only limited to the regulators themselves. Now, what are also the reasons why we're not always able to achieve that? And of course, I think one of the reasons is also that there are two parallel universes, and one is the sort of, let's say, the public sector and the regulator, and the other is the industry. And I think that these should not go in parallel, but these should get mixed much more. So I would say it's also the regulators, sometimes the unwillingness to reach out to the industry. I think that it is very important to work together. Industry is a partner, it is not an adversary. And I think it is important to see through that, because in the end of the day, we want the same thing. We want the highest levels of safety, security, and at the same time also to make sure that we will not take away through the regulation the possibility to innovate. But another element I will just mention is also the rigidity of the procedures. Very often the procedures are set in stone, and nobody has not enough incentive to change that. And there you need to have two things. You need to have a certain political pressure, but you also need to have more, let's say, innovative regulators themselves. And again, hence coming back to my earlier point, the more you interact with industry, the more you actually get this sense of innovation and the willingness to innovate. And of course, you know, we all know doing things the old way, it has been the way how we've always done it, so why do we need to change? And that is always very dangerous, because then you risk falling behind the curve, because the real life moves on much faster than you actually react to that. And then you become reactive, and then you will not be actually in charge, but you will be rather sort of trying to react to situations which have already happened. And then you do things in a bit of a rushed way, you lock into something which might also be not the best solution, having the future in mind. Of course, then we come to the big topic we have talked about, innovation, digitalization. Digitalization is also a huge challenge, because through the digitalization, things around us are changing faster than they used to change in the past. And that was also more easier with a more static regulation. Today, the regulation must be much more dynamic, because since usually the rule-making or the regulation-making procedure is relatively long, then you come to the situation where once it has been adopted, it's already actually outdated. So you also should not see all the eventualities and maintain the degree of flexibility, which I think is very, very important. And also maybe one point I want to make, and which I consider is quite important, is also the human dimension. And that's also something, you know, sometimes you do not want to embrace entirely the innovation from the regulator's perspective or from the political point of view, because it might also have some implications on the jobs and on the labor. And of course, that creates usually problems to any constituency. So you try to avoid that by not perhaps creating the best conditions for the innovation to be pursued. Now there, of course, I think the only remedy is that you really always think through this human component, because when we talk about the automation, for example, it's clear that it's going to change things, but it doesn't necessarily replace the human component, and you should see that also happening in a longer period and in a phasing out way. So again, I think keeping that in mind is essential. It should not be something which would prevent you from moving ahead with more modern regulation, but at the same time, I think the regulators need to be very attentive to that and address this issue, so that whatever you do, it is also palatable to the societies. And I think that this actually is valid across the board. And I also noted there was one question: what is the latest example of let's say public service innovation? I mean, we looking at it from the European perspective also, we always rejoice when we manage to cut down the administrative costs, simplify and cut down the regulations. And We have been doing that in aviation also quite successfully in the past, but my best example comes from railways, where by sort of replacing certain procedure of certification that currently happened in 28 member states and assigning this to one European Union agency for railways, we were able to get rid of about 1,000 pieces of legislation, and the annual cost savings are about $500 million. So you can actually do that, and I think that that also applies to certain elements that you would do here. If you bring it to the global level or even to the regional level, you can actually be able to cut the costs as well, and at the same time support the innovation and also the modern and smart regulation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for drawing our attention to the fact that there is also efficiency gains in terms of monitoring the costs of regulation by working together. I give the floor now to Patrick Iyaza.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving us the opportunity to talk to this at this roundtable. With the exception of ICAO, where the President showed us how innovative some of your staff can be in building new solutions, innovation, let's face it, is mostly in the hands of the industry, and sometimes very local industry. And the challenge for us regulators is first to keep pace with the innovation, but also to make sure that any innovation will still meet with the public interest. The role of regulators is to defend the public interest in terms of sustainability. That means safety, security, and environmental impact. And that's a real challenge. Just to give you a very simple example, we had in the last 2 days a lot of presentations on what the artificial intelligence can bring in terms of increased level of efficiency and safety. And the real question for us regulators is how can we certify artificial intelligence systems in order to make sure that there are no safety or security loopholes in this. And you asked us to be pragmatic and to propose to you some best practices. I'm not sure it's necessarily best practices, but I can share with you what in EASA we have decided to do in terms of our approach to innovation. And I would like to propose to you basically 6 principles that we have implemented in EASA. The first principle is that we need to integrate innovation into our organization. We have created an innovation cell, which is very small. It's 2 persons. But in this cell, it is the place within the organization which concentrates, coordinates, and disseminates information on projects and on innovation. The second principle is to learn. It is essential that authorities can learn as soon as possible about new technologies and principles. This can only be achieved through a partnership with industry, through which regulators' personnel can participate to innovative projects. We have signed so far 9 innovation partnership memorandum of cooperations with industry in the EU and outside the EU. And it's extremely beneficial both for the industry and for the regulator. And this is basically implementing what Henrik was mentioning in his partnership with the industry. The third principle is to educate. This is extremely important. Approach to innovation needs to become a corporate value. Our innovation cell animates a network of 200 people. It's a kind of Facebook group in which people share, discuss, sometimes argue about the benefit of one innovation, what it implies, what kind of impact it has, how it works, and so on and so forth. This is extremely valuable. So, education. The fourth principle is to adapt our methodologies. Just to give you an example, we have started the process of adapting our certification methodologies in order to deal with artificial intelligence. The fifth principle is to be technology agnostic. We need to move to performance-based rules which do not prescribe a given technology, but provide a performance target. I like to use for this the example of the automobile industry, where a target is given in terms of CO2 or particle matters emissions, and the industry just needs to reach that target, regardless of how they do it. And the last principle, but we mentioned it already, we discussed about it, is to engage with new entrants. Innovation brings about a new breed of stakeholders, typically drones manufacturers or operators, new digital companies, and so on and so forth. And a number of those are present around this table today. Those new stakeholders need to be listened to because they provide new insight into our business, which can bring a wide range of opportunities and benefits. But we also need to educate them on the reality of our business, in particular on our extremely high safety expectations. Mr. President, you were mentioning the 10 to the minus 9 target, and this is something that this type of industry has not been exposed to so far. But also the social dimension of change, and just referring to what Henrik was mentioning as well, and the need for all users to share the same airspace. I would like to thank again ICAO for organizing this meeting and enabling this exchange. It is not necessarily ICAO which will facilitate all the innovative projects around the world, but it is certainly ICAO which will enable the entire community to benefit from individual projects. So I thank you very much for that. If I may, just one final remark on no country left behind. Innovation, and in particular digitalization, brings, I don't know if the word exists in English, I don't know if it exists in French either, but so I hope that the translators will be able to translate it. So innovation brings the dematerialization of assets. Did you understand? So basically, with digitalization, we can get rid of systems, infrastructure on the ground. And this is a tremendous opportunity for a lot of countries which would not have to procure, install, maintain costly equipment to be put on the ground, but basically rely on the cloud, rely on telecommunication in order to perform a service. So this is what innovation is enabling for countries in order to make sure that no countries are left behind. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Asa. Thank you so much for that. ACI, please.
Well, I kind of highlight some of the innovations that are already going on that affect the airport space. I use space in both ways because space is very limited at airports. It's very difficult for airports in many countries to get more space. So we're very much focused on the optimum use of that space. And so we're seeing all kinds of emerging technologies and innovations, biometric entry and exit clearance, artificial intelligence, digital travel documents, electronic and mobile customs declaration. We see it on the airfield as well with ACDM and other initiatives that come out of the block upgrades. And the point I'm trying to make here is that perhaps we should accept the notion of jagged improvement so that we have improvements through innovation, through various states or actors using innovation, with ICAO keeping a briefing watch, shall we say. You know, it's back to this concept of encouraging pilots. So you don't have regulation, you don't actually change the regulation you have because you don't know if this is going to be the breakthrough, but you kind of waive the regulation because you're looking at a hopeful innovation and then catch up with it. And ICAO, in the meantime, is issuing best practices so that countries can at least take a look at what others have found successful before there's a maturation to an actual regulation, either national or global. Just a thought.
No, thank you, ACI. Thank you so much for that. Councillor, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just before I start, I do have an answer to your question that you raised early on this morning, but we can come back to that perhaps a bit later. Unusually, or usually, I agree very much with what Patrick and Henrik have said. So they've stolen most of what I intended to say. So I'm just going to follow on from some of those things. Your first question about concern about government policy slowing things down, I think that's an interesting concept in that change only happens at the rate at which change can happen. And that's determined by the slowest part or slowest change agent in any change, whether that's a regulator or not. So I'm not sure we should dwell on that question too much. We've already mentioned this morning that it's about the new players entering the market, innovate much quicker. They don't always follow the heritage rules, laws, regulations that are currently in existence, and they actively force change. And we were talking about other transport industries this morning, and I think Uber is a great case in point. They forced change. They didn't consider current law as much heritage laws and regulations. And interestingly, governments have responded differently in different countries. So there's not quite the consistency, perhaps, that is needed. The obstacles to change is an interesting one again. We talk about them as all sorts of different things: a lack of expertise, a lack of capability, a lack of resource, a lack of time. But really, they're all symptoms, I think, of one big obstacle, the elephant in the room, if you like, and that's fear of failure. Or what if we get it wrong? Because that's often catastrophic if we get it wrong, as a government or particularly as a regulator. So how do we, I think the big question is, because that's a valid fear. That's the right fear. Safety is the core, the foundation of the whole of aviation, as far as I'm concerned. So how do we solve that conundrum of embracing rapid change at the same time as maintaining, an extraordinarily high level of safety? And I think it's quite simple. And its simplicity is about actually governments, regulators, industry working together. And I see the word consultation written down a lot. That's not the same. Consultation is asking for something and getting input and then going away and doing something with it. For me, it's about collaboration, true collaboration, learning from each other, being part of the team, in inverted commas, and solutioneering together. Now, I understand that governments and regulators need to take a stand back at some point, and that's right. But if they've been involved throughout that whole learning process and innovation process with industry, then the regulation, I think, will certainly be more proportionate. Everybody retains their accountabilities. It will certainly be much more consistent than it perhaps has been in the past. Very transparent, because everybody will see it and know it. And it'll be focused actually on what's really, really needed. And they're all elements of better or smarter regulation that we keep referring to. So working in silos, I think, creates obstacles. Working together, anything's possible. And there's just one more comment that I want to make, following on from Patrick's comment about dematerialisation. That's right, and I think that's one of the biggest regulatory changes that are coming. I can foresee a future where all data is probably free. Big data. There's data, information will be available. Information sharing, information usage, there'll just be data everywhere. So what will happen is services will be provided that add value to that data. And as a regulator, that's a particularly difficult area to regulate, I think. So that's a big challenge that I think is coming in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do you want to provide answer to the question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, you asked a question, are ANSPs able to meet best equipped, best served type principle? They do, or they have done. Now, it's not consistent, I hasten to add, all over the world, but there are certainly places where a better equipped aircraft is given a better service. From Cat 3 to Cat 1 ILS equipped aircraft being able to land in certain weathers, to data link aircraft that can have information over the oceans to arrive at a certain time, slow down, speed up, so there's no holding or no delay on getting there. But it's not consistent, and there's pockets of this. I think it's really difficult to get to best equipped, best served when the industry is operating on first come, first served. And until those two match up, where the airline systems and the ATM systems are all joined up together and operating of the same principles, it becomes really, really tricky. If the industry is measured on off-blocks time rather than anything else, then that's going to drive a certain behaviour that you can be the best equipped aircraft in the world, but if you're all trying to get to the same place at the same time, that's a particularly tricky scenario to manage. So I think it can be vastly improved, but there are pockets of it going on already.
Okay, thank you so much. Ayata.
Thank you, Mr. President. Three points on this subject. First of all, on the content of the regulation, what it should be, you will not be surprised if we advocate in favor of smart regulation, which for us means two things. First of all, a very strong consultation, not consultation, cooperation, collaboration, to take the words of my predecessor, between industry, between the various stakeholders, but particularly between industry and regulators and governments. And second issue about smart regulation, a very strong cost-benefit analysis. We should be able to know whether or not a regulation is necessary or if it's adapted properly. The second issue, the second point, how could we improve the speed, the effectiveness, the efficiency of the regulation or the regulatory bodies? I would like to suggest two things. First of all, the right to experiment. The right to experiment some new regulation or new approach to technologies. And second, a much stronger cooperation between regulators and between governments. We have a lot of areas in which the lack of cooperation and between government is creating an enormous issue for the industry. Just to mention security. Just this point. Well, so everybody probably is aware of what I'm referring to. The third theme I would like to mention is perhaps, I don't want to be provocative, but perhaps when we talk about regulation, perhaps we should think about deregulation, stop regulating, or delegate regulation. Think about that. Perhaps the current bodies are not the appropriate bodies, or do not have the means or the staff or the expertise or to make the regulation, and perhaps they should delegate or cooperate with other bodies. And that could be also a solution that we could put on the table to improve the regulatory framework or the regulatory process. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ayata. IASA says the role of regulator is to defend public interest. When you delegate regulation, then you have to be very careful that the regulator is still able to defend public interest and ensure that the arrangement is such that protects the public interest. So I don't see anything wrong in delegation, but once you delegate, you still have the responsibility to ensure that the delegated system is working to the interest of the public. ICCAIA.
Thank you, Mr. President. Real quickly on the issue of consultation, I believe that I agree with my predecessors that collaboration is a better and more accurate word, and I would say we're already doing that. We need more. I mentioned at the plenary this morning that ICCAIA will be introducing a paper suggesting a new construct under ICAO, working groups or a different type of body that allows industry to continue working between the regularly scheduled ICAO meetings, perhaps accelerating the pace for new regulation, keeping safety paramount, of course. And I bring it up again, Mr. President, because this could be a very good place to include new entrants who might not fit into the existing international organizations, even as those organizations, ICCIA included, are thinking through the definition of what membership means. This new structure would still be under the auspices of ICAO, allow industry to keep working and be a place where new entrants could contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. Airbus, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. In fact, most of the points I had to make were made, so I will keep my point very short. I think overall about the regulations, you said rightly a minute ago that we need to serve the public interest, and the current situation around the MAX crisis is something that would have a tendency to inflate the regulatory pressure, while at the same time we are talking about innovation and making it simpler, more performance-based. We together will have to be very careful and responsible in the way we address this kind of perceived paradox. I think it's more a point of philosophy at the moment, but I think we may find ourselves stretched between a tendency from the public opinion to require more from the regulators and from the authorities, and at the same time emerging technologies that will require to be lighter, leaner, simpler. So far, this can be, depending the way we take it, this can be perceived as a paradox. So let's carefully handle that, and I think the initiatives like the ones proposed by the ICCIA, having a working group supporting you in this approach, makes a lot of sense.
No, thank you. Of course, there is a question as to how we embrace innovations from other sectors in aviation and try to take advantage of those. But when it comes to regulatory system, we are less decentralized than the other sectors. New types of electric bicycles or bikes being used in different cities, follow different types of regulation and local issues, and here in this city is banned, in the other city it is allowed. Even talking about the response to Uber has been mentioned, the response differs from one state to the other. We in the aviation industry have been used to this on the basis of harmonization and global interoperability to implement at the global level some level of regulations, whether they are performance-based or prescriptive, even when it is performance-based. Like Angela Isai mentioned about the issue of exchange of information about best practices. Again, it also recognizes the necessity that even at the local level, when these products are moving from one jurisdiction to the other, that we tend to think of the need to have some commonalities in rules and approaches. It will be interesting to hear from your perspectives what you think about that. And we mentioned a little bit of that before. But just take that point. We may want to comment on that. But I want to combine the other two items, embracing latest technologies in governments and creating a culture of innovation in government, as two sides of the same issue. How do we apply new technologies to governments? And for us to do that, we have to create a culture of innovation in governments. And I give the floor, if Canada, you want to take a stab at this and to lead.
I would offer a brief comment, Mr. President, and I would support the. I was found the 6 principles of a colleague from YASA quite instructive in this domain, because you have to build. It does start, and I agree completely. You have to build an organizational structure in the regulator to drive innovation. There has to be somebody whose job it is to challenge the status quo in the regulatory system. And we have not as developed as YASA, but have a system in Transport Canada to do that. And without that, the people who own the current regulatory structure, talking to the current regulatees will have a very hard time seeing the system. So I would simply provide the brief comment of looking to the example of our YASA colleague put out as a way forward here.
Thank you, Canada. Okay, let me look to some of the states. Please, I'll ask China to be brief. China.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think during our ministerial forum, introduced this subject. It's very relevant, especially when I heard lots of suggestions and problems and new thoughts about this issue. It's very inspiring concerning harmonizing of the regulation, concerning dematerialization, and all the civil aviation administrations should follow some basic principles. Concerning the administration of the sector and the regulation of the sector, this is quite challenging for Chinese aviation with a huge amount of work, and how to strike a balance between the efficiency, the regulation, and the quality of the services. And we encountered lots of difficulties, and we would like to seize this opportunity to share our thoughts with our dear colleagues. Concerning the regulation, we are facing two things. First, it's a legislation, and secondly, it's operation of the regulation. Implementation of the regulation. So in terms of the legislation, first we have the courage, and secondly we wanted to be more open. We have a courage because over the last year we spent 1 year to restructure the whole system of regulatory system and reform the whole system to improve our efficiency, to collect all the resources and to find the efficient ways. And we create 47 items and the proposals to forecast the future development and to have a better regulation. We know that the aviation needs capitals, so we should strike a balance between the regulation and capital mobilization. And secondly, facing the rapid speed of the development of the sector and of the technology, we want to consult three sectors. First, the industry. Secondly, associations. So the corporation associations, ACI, and all the international associations and the national professional associations. We consult closely with these associations, and we hold lots of meetings to get their voice heard. And third, we listen to foreign allies to get their voice, to get their recommendation. How can we put in place regulations which are in line with the WTO's regulations? So this is the aspect of the legislation. Secondly, for the implementation of the regulations, we need to cut the cost of the government. So we would like to reduce the cost through innovations. First, we use the telecommunication techniques to put in place distant regulations. Of course, we ensure the quality of the regulation and use the distant technology, we can reduce largely the cost. Secondly, by using big data, we can quickly identify difficulties facing companies. For instance, we could identify high risks for the dangerous goods. And the big data has a large area of utilization. So we can identify lots of risks with the big data for the carriers and for the transportation companies. And secondly, we want to reduce the cost for the industries. Our objective is to help companies reduce their cost. Of course, when the company is in line or in compliance with the regulations, through cooperation and benefits sharing, we share our data, regulatory data, with companies in terms of safety in particular. Because we think in terms of safety, the regulatory bodies have the same interest as the industries. So we can gather all the data on this safety, the big data on the safety, and to share with the companies, and share with each company on the data relevant to them, to allow the company to take jointly actions if needed. On this basis, the regulatory body can take jointly the effort and the measures and steps with the industries. We started these steps and studies in 2015, and we put it in place a system called SES system. And this is a system combining internet and regulation. We want to implement better the document 9734 of ICAO. This is part of our national efforts. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, China. Grenada.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Madam Secretary General, it is indeed a great pleasure for me to be here and a great learning experience. This is my first time, and I want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm not sure I'm going to be responding exactly, Mr. President, to what you asked for, but I wanted to speak on the issue of the concern that governments are slow in implementing regulations in keeping with trends, if you would allow me. And to speak to that, I just want to use the example that I had with an experience I've had recently with ICAO and the regional director when we had an audit. Sometimes you don't realize where you are until you're audited. And when I found out that our regulations, our legislations, our manuals were all outdated, it was really an eye-opener for me as the minister. And that was the first time I got to speak to the regional director, Mr. Cintron, when he wrote a letter, and I had to call to find out what was the situation. And that began a relationship of communication and consultation or collaboration with ICAO, and Madam Secretary General did give permission for him to just not only provide oversight, because one can do audit and say where you're going wrong and where you're going right. But if you do not have the technical competencies to deal with it and make whatever is wrong right, then your country certainly would be left behind. And so I want to thank ICAO for the support in not just identifying the problems, but having started to work with us to give us ideas on the content of the legislation that needs to be changed. Because if I take it to my Attorney General, he would ask me, what do you want to change? I have to bring the material to him. And therefore, I have received that kind of support from ICAO, not just directly, but through our regional oversight body, ECA, and having established that relationship, I can see small but incremental changes in the positive direction. Someone spoke about working together, and that is so necessary. If we all, as member states, work in silos and we just work to develop our own aviation system, then others will certainly be left behind. We cannot all develop at the same pace. We don't always have to get to the same place, but certainly we have to be able to implement certain standards that would keep us certainly in a satisfactory position. So, one of the things I found out too is that we do not have to reinvent the wheel. There are other member states in the region, in the Caribbean, who have done quite well, and we're engaging them as well and getting support from them. We have had commitments of support so that we will learn fast and get our legislations fixed and so on. So it is not always a lack of political will. Sometimes it's just plain ignorance, if I may say so. I just wanted to also mention some of the obstacles that we meet, and one of it, the main one, is technical or lack of technical competencies. Not enough trained people within a small country area, and even within a small region like the Eastern Caribbean, you might find that there are gaps, there are deficiencies in technical competencies. And so it may be something that ICAO can look at a little more to provide those competencies, and if there are avenues for training that we can avail ourselves to as well. Finally, I just want to say, in terms of innovations, they are varied, they are many, they come fast and furious. What gives us small member states guidance? What do you implement? How best do you use your resources, financial and otherwise? What innovation should you employ? Should you purchase? Should you engage? What can stay and, maybe be put off for another time? And therefore, these are some technical guidances that we would really love to have access to at some point in time, but I want to assure you that the political will is there, and that with support, maybe we may not be as fast as the innovators would like us to be, but certainly there's a lot more that we can do in picking up the pace. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister from Grenada. This segment of the discussion, you've really touched upon the importance of the collaboration with ICAO and the guidance that we can provide. Previously, colleagues have talked about the issue of ICAO serving as the platform to share experiences in how to deal with innovation. But with respect to also the discussion we have, that governments have to embrace latest technology in reforming their processes, procedures, and undertaking regulatory reform. We need to create a culture of innovation in governments. Clearly, there is a cost to government of processes and regulatory processes, but it's also there is a cost to the regulatee for our processes. We can make it cheaper for governments to do its business. We can also make it cheaper for those that are being regulated. We can all gain from being more effective and more efficient. And if, in terms of operational procedures, innovation can assist with different services being provided, certainly governments themselves have to imbibe the spirit of innovation and to take advantage of the same technologies that is available out there to reform their processes. And of course, as the body, your organization, ICAO, will have to follow suit to work with you in that regard and provide, where it is necessary, the platform to share experiences and best practices. People have said that the use of big data, digitalization, automation can help with making these processes simpler. Of course, you have to also have the software backbone available within the governments to do this, and knowing fully well that government, maybe the civil aviation sector or administration in each government can lead the way of government reforms within a state and provide that leadership and for others to follow, because we have to ensure continuum within the government operation at the national level, also between aviation and the other sectors, including telecommunication sector, the education sector, to learn new processes and new procedures and to make use of IT provisions that are available and services that are available. Is there any of our colleagues that still have a comment to make on any of these issues before we round up as to our statement, because we will have the high-level panel also waiting for us in the assembly in the hall very soon. Any other comments? PNG, Papua New Guinea.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me this opportunity to make a few comments. This is in relation to regulatory cost. It's commonly acknowledged that aviation is always at the leading edge of technology, but aviation traditionally has been practiced with a lot of conservatism. And here we are talking about issues which are really pushing those boundaries. The tech companies or startups that are bringing these new innovations or technologies into the market space, in the main would have the financial resources to bring those innovation or technology, or new technologies into the system. Regulators, being part of the government system, usually do not. I don't know about the developed world, but in the developing world, that is usually the case, where the regulators do not have the financial resources to keep up with their regulatory work, and they're always in a catch-up mode. That has been mentioned by many speakers. So what I was going to propose is that because policy should drive legislation. So what I'm proposing is that tech companies that come up with these new innovations or technologies on a marketplace should help the regulators write the policies, because they understand the technology that they're coming up with. So they should help the regulators write the policies and subsequently the regulation to regulate whatever product they're bringing onto the market. But innovations or new technology that come on the market, by their very nature, are disruptive. And because of the disruptive nature of that, then there is a cost involved with that as well. Because any established process or technology has a inertia, and it just keeps going on and on until this new technology or new innovation comes online and causes the disruption or brings the system, aviation system, to a point of inflection where there is great change. So therefore, because of the disruption nature of innovation, then there is a cost involved. How that is determined, I don't have the answer for that. So and because of this, there's a cost involved, including regulatory cost as well. And therefore, what I'm going to propose, or what I would like to propose, is that the tech companies or that are bringing up these new technologies, there should be, let me just simply call it disruptive or innovation levy or cost involved, that they should be levied for bringing this technology into the marketplace until that technology is determined to become mainstream. And if we are going to levy the tech companies that bring up with these new technologies, then the tax regime should recognize it and make that cost tax deductible, as it is the normal practice in many areas. And the last thing that I want to bring up is regulators should not try and regulate the retail sector. Let me give an example. In many parts of the world, including Papua New Guinea, there are many models of drones flying everywhere. Every dog and every man and his dog, they want to fly drones for whatever reason. But you can't regulate the retail industry which are selling these drones. But what the regulator should do is specify the specifications of drones that can put into the airspace. Someone speaker earlier on made the comment about commoditization of the airspace. And this is one area where the regulator determines the specs of the drones that can be put up in the airspace, and retail outlets that do not conform to this, well, it's bad for their business. And they have to sell products which meet the requirements of the regulator themselves in order for their products to be put into their airspace. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you so much for that. Now, I want to call on the Secretary General to quickly provide the other aspects of our statement, and she will draw attention to those areas where we have made some slight amendments to take account of the discussion we had earlier this morning and those issues that were missing. So, Secretary General, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. This morning we had very good discussion, and Secretariat made an update of the draft outcome document. I would like to go together with you, paragraph by paragraph, with the changes. First paragraph, no change. Second paragraph, we add after solution and tools, and also add big data in the second paragraph, as well as we made and address issues such as environmental protection. Yes.
Continue.
Yes.
Yes, Henrik, please. European Commission.
Thank you. I mean, I very appreciative that you have taken these suggestions on board. Nevertheless, I would just think that it might be worthwhile to consider environmental protection is very, very generic. I would rather say that the reduction of the environmental footprint, which I think is our aim, because environmental protection is relatively static. Here, you don't see that actually you would go and want to become better. I think that would probably express in a more appropriate way what has also been discussed and what we actually want to achieve and what we are achieving. Thank you.
Thank you, Henrik. Thank you. Well, to address issues such as emissions reduction, emissions reduction? Okay. Emission reduction. Yeah. Emissions reduction. Please continue.
Okay. So paragraph 3, no change. Paragraph 4, no change. Paragraph 5, there is some change, adding cyber security, and also we're adding environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable development of a global scale. Does it reflect what the suggestions? Okay, so now move on. Next paragraph, no change. The next paragraph also no change. Now moving to innovation in aviation regulation and governance. That is what we discussed actually this afternoon. And then next paragraph. it's we have paragraphs 9 underlines the importance of governance and coordination among involved stakeholders for expedited and optimized processes in response to and by leveraging as well the latest technologies. Then the paragraph 10 builds on previous discussion and reflects the session's intent to call for further discussions and analysis of how latest technology may be of benefit to improve existing regulatory frameworks. Paragraph 11, the last 3 paragraphs stated the intent of today's meeting for future steps, which are underscored by the importance of continuous cooperation among all stakeholders to take the full advantage of the latest technologies. Paragraph 12 highlights our commitment today to continue sharing our experiences and to provide grounds for an inclusive dialogue among all stakeholders in the civil aviation community. The last paragraph will link our efforts to the upcoming 40th Assembly, and we look forward to Assembly's deliberations taking into account this statement. I want to draw your attention the paragraph second to the last paragraph. We made change. Could go to screen? Yeah. So we make it clearer between and among member states and government, of course, non-government organization, private sector, the all stakeholders, to facilitate an introduction of innovation in civil aviation, strengthen community outreach efforts. This is ACI's suggestion. I'll be added here. Any suggestions, comments? President, I hand to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, I'm sure it's not what we have. Perhaps it's not the most perfect document at this stage, but we'll try to capture all the discussions. We'll be going into the high-level discussion in the plenary, which is will be the last session. We will not enjoy any break. The people in the Assembly, they had their last break now, and they're expecting us to continue. I would just ask that if you allow me to request and invite the minister from Papua New Guinea and the minister from Mexico to present on our behalf the outcome statement from our Ministerial Roundtable sessions to all participants in the last session of today's event to be held in the Assembly Hall. I want to thank all of you for your participation, and once again, I want to apologize for the delay this afternoon. It was not intended. Please, 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 please. I ask for your forgiveness. I know that throughout this Assembly, I've been running into a lot of scheduling difficulties. It's difficult to have discussions with ministers for 15 minutes when they have so many issues they want to put on the table. And this is the opportunity to have those. So I really, really ask for your, I apologize for the delay. And I want to thank you for your understanding. Now, we changed the format this year to try something new. I don't know whether it has worked very well, but I know that we've had the opportunity for free exchange rather than a seminar type of approach that we have employed for previous IWAF, at least in this hall and in this chamber and in the Assembly Hall. There have been some very fruitful discussions, and these discussions will continue throughout the Assembly. Thank you so much, and then let's proceed to the Assembly Hall. Thank you. Thank you.
What time is it?
Excuse me, please. I don't want us to get miscommunication from the Secretariat again for the timing of the next one. No. Toru, no. You say 4 o'clock.
No,
yeah?
already. already.
Yes.
No. Just a moment. Already, that the next session already started. Yes,
And the final for the minister,
yes.
at what time?
already passed. That's why that's 4:30.
Then why did you say 4:30?
No.
Please, let's go to the hall now, right?
Yes.
Okay.